We are here. We organized this, let's say, quick seminar because Professor Alessandro Rosiello came to Jakarta from Edinburgh, and we thought it was a good idea to organize this discussion. I think we will hear from his research, but also from a new innovation center that is being established in Edinburgh in Scotland. That could be a very interesting example and give us idea also about certain model that could be, let's say, adapted to the Southeast Asian context, especially nowadays. Maybe many of you are already familiar. At ERIA, we are basically setting up a center about digital innovation and sustainability. And who knows, maybe some of the ideas that we will be discussing today could be interesting for the development of this new center. And I mean, we also discussed a little bit with Alessandro about potential partnerships and collaborations in the future. So once again, I mean, it could be an interesting hour and a half. We're also very grateful to the panelists that will participate in the, let's say, second part of the seminar, the more interactive discussion. Ganesh from Learn Asia, and we will hear from him later on, and also Patricia, who's joining us online from Helsinki, Finland. Yeah, we see you, great. Who is a senior analyst at the UN Global Pools. But perhaps, and I mean, anyway, we also would like to have as much as possible an interactive discussion with you all. So in the second part of the conversation, feel free to let us know if you have questions, if you want to intervene, any comment will be absolutely more than welcome. And I just forgot to introduce myself, but I'm Giulia, and I work for ERIA, and I've been working with Alessandro in the past as I'm an innovation economist. This is my background. And here at ERIA, I'm doing different things, but I've been quite active in developing projects and partnerships around the innovation ecosystems. We have built some networks of startups from Southeast Asia and beyond. And we want to continue to do that even more with the new digital center. Many thanks to Amelia and the entire communication unit for their support as ever. And now I think it's time to give the floor to Alessandro.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. As introduced by Giulia, I come from the University of Edinburgh, where I'm professor of innovation, entrepreneurship, and business. But I'm also innovation director of a new center that has been established. It's called the Edinburgh Futures Institute. And so, first of all, I thought with Giulia that it'd be a good idea to use this very innovative approach that we are developing. And I'll give you a bit of background on how it came along. For me, it's very interesting that here you start with this new center for digital innovation, because we are trying to do basically the same thing. But this is part. Needs to be red. Okay. Needs to be red. Okay. I thought white, it's on, and red off normally, but yeah. Okay. So, why is the UK government interested now in innovation? Innovation is, they think, is the lifeblood of business. It will allow UK companies to win greater shares of existing markets and create new markets. What we noticed coming out of the, not the last recession caused by COVID, but the previous one caused by the financial crisis of 2008, 2011, is that what really got the economy in the UK out of that recession were fast-growing, what we call scale-ups. So fast-growing new companies, innovative companies. They basically explain more than 50% of the recovery growth that the UK was able to achieve.
to go back to its previous levels. But innovation is also very important for society. And what we expect out of it is that new ideas in the shape of new knowledge, new products, new services, new business models will help us solve challenges that are currently affecting the world. So, last but not least, they also think that innovation is critical for the international reputation of the country. So this innovation strategy sort of constitutes the background to the story I want to tell you, and how we came to the setting up of the center I work for right now. So the UK was and still is at a crossroad in economic terms, because for a number of years, the economy has suffered for very low productivity. It's the least productive country of the G8. We have COVID-19, and we also have Brexit, that I think you're familiar with. So that poses major challenges. And what they're trying to do, they think that what they want to do throughout the country is to build a strong ecosystem for innovation that involves not just the private sector, but also government, R&D organizations, finance, founders of new businesses, as we said earlier, and also international partners that are involved in complementary activities. And they see a big opportunity in things like AI or quantum technology, where they think the UK has got like a technological advantage, having very strong capabilities in those domains. So in the document I'm talking about, they're using this scheme made by Luke Gorgie on a 2015 paper, where basically illustrates how the ecosystem, in their view, sort of comes together. And from a political standpoint, it's also very interesting because after Brexit, the UK government developed what's called the leveling up agenda. They realized that the real reason why people voted for Brexit is the fact that increasingly over the past 30 years, there's been a disconnect between the center and the periphery of the economy. In geographical terms, we got the capital region and the southeast that is very successful economically, and other regions that are falling, and cities that are falling behind. And so they needed something to close the gap. So other things we have seen, as I said, low productivity, declining R&D investments, low rates of technological adoption by the majority of the companies in the UK, a risk of brain drain, mostly done to Brexit, and necessity also to change things like regulation that applies to things like how we can use data. That's a big issue in Europe. I don't know about here. And also, protecting IP, that is a critical asset for global competition. So they developed this strategy, and they have some basic pillar in terms of wanting to promote innovation, as I just said, especially in SMEs that they expect to grow very fast. I put a link there. I don't know if this presentation will be shared afterwards, but basically around 7% of the scale-ups are in the ICT domain. So it's a very important area from a strategic standpoint. Finance, as I said, is very important, but also, and something that we discussed yesterday in some of the visits I had with the UN Global Pulse. I see some people here with Prospera, which is another organization that we visited yesterday. We are really moving away this idea that the government should not be intervening in the economy. The government is prepared to intervene big time in the economy. And in terms of supporting the innovation ecosystems from a financial standpoint, we got many different organizations at different levels. We got the British Business Bank that is providing grants and support finance for new entrepreneurial firms. We got something similar in Scotland, something similar in Northern Ireland, something similar in Wales. We got Innovate UK, which is the innovation agency for the UK, has been set up a few years ago. We got tax incentives, very strong tax incentives to invest in innovation and innovative new firms. They're trying to develop a pro-innovation regulatory environment and also invest in infrastructure. And that's where it's very important to us because our center is part of this new infrastructure they're trying to develop. They also try to capitalize on data, as I said, because they think data and IT is part of this infrastructure that will unleash these new capabilities that are trying to develop. That's not moving anymore. Okay. Then in Scotland, we got like a similar and parallel process happening. So Scotland is part of the UK, but it's got its own government that is responsible for some areas in terms of administrating the local economy. And 2 years ago, a new report was published by a research group that was led by a guy called Mark Logan. And Mark Logan is the founder of the most famous unicorn in Scotland over the past few years. It's called Skyscanner. I don't know if you've ever used it. It's a search engine online. Their office is very close to our offices. And he did some thinking on how to develop and reinforce the local innovation ecosystem. And basically, the key point is that the Scottish innovation ecosystem is not, at the moment, at the tipping point. So what we need to do, we need to expand the funnel. We need to make it wider and generate endogenous incremental dynamics as part of its process of development. It made a number of recommendations, among which, for example, there is to start what he called a tech scaler, which is a national program to basically develop incubators that will help local companies develop their IoT content and adopt best practice, also develop a stronger ecosystem, social infrastructure, and an integrating funding strategy to help local companies. But also, it's very clear that we need to invest in our students, especially STEM students, and equip them with startup skills. We need to build a strong social infrastructure that includes not just education, but also strong support and peer support for the local companies. And also very strong incentive for private investing in innovation. Then after that, a new report has been published just this year. And this is about how to integrate entrepreneurial campuses into this ecosystem that I'm talking about, placing academic institutions at the core of these ecosystems that we are trying to develop. And this is where my experience with this sort of initiated as director of innovation for this new center that's been set up. This report wrote by a guy called Ross Taffy touches about a number of points. The first one is to change the mentality of the people. I was telling Julia just at lunch how difficult it is for me to do this kind of job in the context of the institution I work for, the University of Edinburgh. Even using some words sometimes upsets some of my colleagues. I can't really talk openly about sometimes entrepreneurship or thought leadership because they think they are sort of too businessy kind of words for the word of education. And so, you know, sometimes I have to adapt my vocabulary to make sure that people will find it acceptable. Okay? So we need to try to change that kind of mentality. So the entrepreneurial mindset is very important. Trying to create that mindset is very important. As I said earlier, we want to create programs that allow any kind of student, not just business students, to learn something about starting a business. We call it Enterprise for All. We want to create launch pads for people and students and colleagues that really want to start new businesses, especially with the IP that's been created within the context of the university background. We want to create a multidisciplinary environment that is the best background to do that, because interdisciplinarity we see in theory and practice is really what most of the times now is prompting the emergence of these new ideas that then led to the creation of new businesses, but not just new businesses, new innovation that is valuable for society. We want to work with the local entrepreneurial communities and organizations. There is lots in Scotland emerging at the moment. And we want to create a pathway to allow our students and our colleagues within the university to get access to this tech scaler program of incubators that's now been created, and the Scottish government has invested last year £42 million into that. And then there is a lot of untapped potential in some parts of the economy. And a major concern for us is female entrepreneurship. There's a new report that's been published by Annie Stewart and Mark Logans just a few months ago that basically shows that only 1 out of 10 new founders is a woman. And that's, we need to improve that. If you want, you can read this report, but there are a number of recommendations that come out of the identification of barriers to female entrepreneurship, from the way in which they are constrained by the everyday life to general understanding of their role in society, to the fact that it's more difficult for them to become part of formal and informal networks, and so on and so forth. So support needs to be provided for groups of people that are underserved by the local ecosystem. Okay, so to do that, in Edinburgh, what happened is that the UK government went around as part of its leveling gap agenda and decided that to develop parts of the country beyond London and the Southeast, they would offer local deals, they could. So they would go to city councils or regions and say, how do you think you can develop your economy further? How can you develop new sectors? How can you restructure your local economy if it needs to be? And they came to Edinburgh as well. Edinburgh doesn't really need it because aside London is the most affluent area in the UK. We got a very strong financial sector. We got 4 universities, one of which is the 3rd best in the UK. It's the most touristic city in the country, probably the most beautiful from an architectural standpoint. So Edinburgh doesn't need help from the government. But nevertheless, they offered us a deal, and we decided that our city deal was going to be based around our strong capabilities in data, IT, and AI. Edinburgh University is the 3rd best university in Europe in IT and the 3rd best in the world in AI. So our strategy to restructure or improve the local economy moving forward is based on those kind of capabilities, and obviously puts the university at the core of that. And basically the idea is that we want to make Edinburgh the data capital of Europe. So this data-driven innovation program, it will last for 15 years, and it started with an investment of almost $1 billion. And part of that is funding coming from the UK and the Scottish governments. And there is 3 areas of strategic focus, which is talent, research, adoption of technology, data sets, and entrepreneurship. And as part of that, what we have done, we have created 6 hubs. They are virtual, but also physical space, where basically the university is going to meet the private sector, but also civil society at large, and government as well. We call those between us, among us, collision spaces, areas where anybody can go in and meet with people from very different backgrounds, from very different organizational environments, and work on new ideas, find new ways, develop new innovation that will transform the local economy. So we got our digital skills, and we got sectors where specifically we want to develop excellence and sort of direct the ecosystem to focus and specialize on. These are things like agri-tech, creative tech, tourism and festival, fintechs, financial services, public sector, health and social care, digital tech, space and satellites, and robotics. These are all areas where we think we got strong capabilities, but there is untapped potential in terms of developing the local economy, okay? And this is quite bad because these are the places, but I don't think the slides came up quite nice enough, so you can't see. So this is, you can't see it here, but this is the Bayes Institute. So the white boxes underneath would say Bayes Institute. So this is the Bayes Institute is the place where the AI infrastructure of the local. So it's close to the School of Informatics, and it's where IT and AI meets society and the private sector. This is a place outside Edinburgh. It's called the Rosalind Institute. It's a very famous institute for animal biotech research. This is the Roboterium, which is a shared place between University of Edinburgh and Heriot-Watt University, which is the second university in Edinburgh, and is where we're going to build robots. This is, I think, I can't remember what this is. I can't recognize it, and I don't know what it is. But this one is the Asher Institute, and it's a place near basically the biggest hospital we have in London, in Edinburgh, and it's basically the new biotech incubator that we have. And finally, this is the place, my place, the Edinburgh Futures Institute. Is the biggest renovation project in Europe at the moment, 240,000 square feet. It used to be the old children's hospital that was built in Edinburgh in 1759. And has been unused since 1986. The university bought it 5 years ago and restructured it completely. It's a fantastic building. It's old outside, but inside is very high tech. It's, if you got a chance to go to Edinburgh, just go. It's just mind-blowing what's going on in there, okay? We invested a lot in it, and it's gonna be a fantastic collision space where, you know, you're gonna have interactive facilities, you're gonna have a lot of things. We're gonna do fusion learning in there. It's really a great space. So what we're gonna do in there, we're gonna sustain innovation in the areas where we are really strong. So we want to build incremental progress in a sort of evolutionary way. But also, there's going to be areas where we want to develop ideas to basically, for disruptive innovation. So we want to disrupt the status quo and kind of come up with revolutionary and radical new ideas that will constitute basically game changers and technological breakthrough. So we want to do both. And EFI will focus more on the second part. And the idea here is that this is not just to change the shape and structure of the local economy, also to solve problems that are important to society, okay? And in like the scientific, social scientific jargon for that is solving wicked problems that society is facing, like things like poverty, crime, income inequality, war, even wars, everything that's got to do with the environmental crisis, pollution and things like that. So we want to challenge all of these areas with the kind of capabilities we have and come up with a change solution that will generate much needed change. Again, here, it's not good because I don't know what happened with when I saved so I can't really comment on these slides, I'm sorry. But basically, at the entrance of our building, there is, we left an inscription that says omnibus patet, which is from Latin, and means that everyone is allowed, okay? We kept it because our idea that everybody that wants to walk in should be able to walk in and be part of this environment we want to create. So it's going to be an interdisciplinary environment, it's going to be a collaborative environment, it's going to be an experimental environment based on digital tech and co-creation of new ideas based on digital tech is going to promote entrepreneurship and creativity. EFI is going to be the interface between external partners and the faculties within the university. And in terms of our approach to it, we are very sensible to issues that have got to do with climate sustainability, but also with data, ethical use of data. So these are, basic principles that will shape our action. I'm sorry, the slides came up very badly, but in that we do three different things. We teach, we research, and we do innovation. Our teaching programs are based on this idea of fusion learning, which means two basic things. From a physical standpoint, you're going to be able, if you take up our program, to sit in the class, but also do it from here. Maybe spend 3 months in Edinburgh and the rest of the time remotely. So we always have students in class, but also students participating remotely through our facilities. All our programs are multidisciplinary, which means that you're not learning a discipline. You're not going to become an engineer or a physicist or a social scientist. It's all based on challenges that we want to tackle. So you're going to learn things like how to, make your city smarter. That's the kind of challenge. And you're going to be taught by a bunch of different kinds of people: economists, lawyers, scientists, technologists, and so on and so forth. Okay? Okay, sorry, I can't comment on those slides. They didn't come up properly. There are, in terms of the areas where we want to do research and innovation, there are basically 4. Each hub that I mentioned earlier has got a remit in terms of the industrial sectors where they need to operate. Our 4 sectors are creative informatics, fintech and financial services, public services and data civics, and tourism and festivals. As you can see, they reflect the kind of capabilities that we have in areas of specialization of the local university, but also of the local economy. And then, as I said, there are 2 cross-cutting teams that we want to promote within the context of these areas of specialization, which is data ethics and AI, and climate and future infrastructure. So within these centers, within this environment, we have already created some centers that are specialized on things we want to do. So we created a center for future infrastructure, where you got people from, as I said, different walks of life, different disciplines, different organizational background, working together on developing new projects and new ideas. Some of them are research projects. Some of them are actually working on concrete ideas to develop new products and services, business models. We got the center and cluster for creative informatics that's been supported by the local government, where you have local companies, but also academics working on common projects. You got the Center for Techno-Moral Futures that's been supported by a local financial institutions. Here is more about based on foresights in terms of how technology is going to shape new futures, especially in the areas of financial services. But what that the key question is that what it means in terms of moral values and ethical approaches to this field. So we've got centers like that. Don't know. I mean, I think the slides are very bad, Emilia. I don't know if we should switch to the PPT. I think when I save it in PDF, it just pick the PPT and I go forward. Yeah, the PPT, that was good. That's it. has opened. Thank you. This was the base center. This was the International Data Facility, Robertarium, Easterbush, Ag Biotech, Ashen Institute Biotech, Animal Futures Institute. Patent Omnibus is what I said earlier, open to everybody. That's what our class looks like when we teach. And that's our, here I'm talking about our vision. So what we want is the EFI to become a magnet for creative disruptors who are going to change our ways of thinking, structure, practices, and markets, business models. But our main goal is to tackle emerging challenges that have been faced by our societies, with the idea of triggering what we call the much needed transformation in the economy, also in society. We are challenge focused. We want to co-create. We are multidisciplinary, and everything we do is enabled by the data bases we have. So we approach real problems. We do that in partnership with society. And we got experts from multiple disciplines, but also multiple organizations. We are motivated by the principles of sustainability and social responsibilities. And in the end, everything we do, as I said, is based on developing innovation using the IT capabilities and AI capabilities we have. We got some KPIs by the end of the 10 years process. Things like, I'm talking about not the general strategy, but just EFI in this case. We're going to develop new companies. We're going to support many organizations. We're going to raise funding from private organizations and other public organizations. And we want to create, for example, 92 new startups. So we got very ambitious objectives. Let's see if we can meet them. We are quite confident that we will, but let's see at the end of the decade. The process started 2 years ago. So by the 2030, we'll see where we are. This is what the local ecosystem is going to look like. So as I said, there is us, there are the other hubs I was talking about. There is the tech scaler that the tender has been won by an organization called Codebase. It's quite famous in the UK right now. It's a network of incubators in the IT space, digital space. We got the digital and innovation skills facilities. We got the Edinburgh Bio Quarter. We got the King's Buildings, which is where all the science faculties are based. But we also have our central campus where the social science faculties are based. Within that, we are also developing an infrastructure that is part of the service that we want to offer, the supportive service that we want to offer to the people that want to work with us. We got things like we're working with organizations like Public Health Scotland, so we're creating a physical space where organization will take a physical space within our buildings. Also, it's possible, of course, to participate virtually. Organizations like Public Health Scotland have already booked to come in. Aberdeen is the biggest investment fund in the UK. It's taking physical space within the EFI. And what they've done, they are creating a center for investing innovation. and with money, with £7.5 million to invest on research projects and innovation projects they're interested in. Yesterday, when I was at the Global Pulse Lab here in Jakarta, they talked to me about ideas dives that they do. I've just participated a couple of weeks ago on a sort of similar initiative that Aberdeen has developed as prompted, and they brought experts in a room, academics, but also people from outside academia, because they noticed that their investment funds that have got ESG tag attached to them are performing better than standard investment funds. And they don't know why. So they want people to explain to them what's going on. Okay, so they have created, we had this 2 days program where we've been discussing and developing ideas, and now they're going to finance that kind of research that will lead to concrete ideas that will improve the way in which they invest their money. So these are the kind of work that we do. Okay. We also creating this infrastructure I was talking about that is part of the service that we can do for you as an innovator in the virtual and physical space that we are developing. We created, for example, a data and design lab that basically provides a service, organizes the discussion. The discussion with Aberdeen I was talking about was organized and prompted and supported by our data and design lab. They mix systemic thinking with virtual and IT capabilities with design thinking. So they organize the discussion, they organize the thinking, and they allow people to collaborate and co-create. We got a place that is called, that is a spin-out of Edinburgh University, that is called the Smart Data Foundry, that's basically in collecting data on financial services in the UK and beyond for the past 20 years. And now they really digitalized and organized all these databases, and that provides the foundation for a number of different studies and partnerships that they are developing. We got another organization, another center is called the Data Culture and Society Center, that basically, again, prompts discussions and supports discussion about different kind of approaches on how to use data in society to find solutions for society, and tries to get ingrained within the local communities, using experts, again, from the social science, from the data science, but also different players in government, business, and society. So as you can see, we are trying to provide an infrastructure for support with many different components, databases, centers, and groups of people that are going to be coming together to work on ideas, collaborate on ideas, but also move these ideas forwards towards something concrete that can benefit society and the economy. And what I've been charged with is to basically organize this kind of process. This is a very complex slide. Basically, what I've done, I developed two logic models that explain how our thinking is organized around making these things happen, but also the different kinds of activities that we're going to be engaging in, and the kind of outcomes that we want to achieve within the timeframes that I was discussing earlier. So, so as you probably know, the logic models are organizing around the three basic components. There is a number of inputs that will lead to a number of outputs, and eventually to a number of concrete outcomes. These outcomes, we can look at them as KPIs that could benefit the economy, society, or even specific individuals or organizations. Okay? So what are the key inputs to what we want to do? Our strategy is organized around two pillars. On the one hand, we want to, at EFI, we want to develop very strong capabilities in terms of foresight capacity and thought leadership. We want to be able to imagine new futures. I mean, Edinburgh Futures Institute tells you all. Also be the leaders in the thinking that we are going to develop around the strategic priorities, lines of strategic thinking that we have. And as again, I see yesterday at the Global Pulse that, you got some strong capabilities here in the city in this area. We also want to develop foresight capacity. So thought leadership and foresight capacity as key pillars of our model to develop our innovation strategy. So what are the basic inputs of this process? These could be assets, could be partnerships that we want to develop, so like a sort of social capital, but also legacies that we have from the past, what already exists in the ecosystem. So we call some of the stuff that I've already presented to you our living lenses. So these are sort of our living labs, the places where the discussions that are going to nurture these innovation processes are going to take place. I talked about our research capabilities, some of our hubs. I talk about some of our centers and some of the labs that we are creating, okay? We're also developing networks. I mean, I'm here today to expand my network, meeting you guys. Yesterday, I was in meetings all over the city because I want to expand our network, not just within Edinburgh, but beyond it, okay? We've got communities of practice that we are developing in different areas, different domains where we think we want to play a role. So resilient communities of people that will periodically meet and work together. And of course, we got our education programs based on this idea of fusion learning that I was talking about earlier. Then we got our areas of strategic focus in terms of where we want to make a difference that I talked about. And then we got our partners, okay? And our partners are research networks and centers within, but also outside the university. We got the innovation platforms that I talked about, and got the capabilities in terms of, you need to be capable of doing foresight if you want to do foresight. You need to be recognized as a leader in an area if you want to do thought leadership. So we need to be able to work on that and expand capabilities. And then we got our databases as well. And I talked about the Smart Data Foundry, very interesting spin out of the university. So all of the mix of these inputs will lead to outputs. We broke down conceptually our outputs in 3 different types of living lenses. There are challenge lenses where basically we're going to develop thematic programs around systemic themes that are critical to us, okay? And what we're going to do there concretely, we're going to convene and facilitate discussions among communities of people that got common interest in those areas. We are going to organize activities like workshops, ideas dives, as I said, or challenge dives, or innovation dives. And we're going to do that, as I said, locally, but also globally, okay? Then we've got what we call practice lenses, enabling practices to take place in areas of strategic value to us that most likely will look like networks, okay? And so we're going to do things like project and program design in these areas. We're going to be mapping challenges that are emerging and we want to focus on. And we're going to look for opportunities to match stakeholders that are interested on those challenges and those areas of interest that we want to focus on, okay? And then finally, we got what we call the emerging lenses. So we want to explore and trailblaze. Productizing and scaling engagement models, and then implementing in practice our foresight and future design projects and services that we want to develop. So that is the essence of the activities that we're going to conduct in terms of our co-creative and co-developing activities, and also the way in which we're going to manage our stakeholders. So eventually, this will lead, hopefully, to a number of KPIs in terms of generating new values and improving technological adoption among the local community, but also working on external education and in that way earning some income for the center and for the university, generating new student projects that might be of interest in terms of solving key challenges for the local ecosystem, but also, as I said, beyond that, and also finding and affecting new areas that are critical to our mission and where we want to have an impact. Okay. So we're going to sort of formalize these approaches and make it part of our routines and the way in which we operate. So that's one side of the strategy, and then I'm going to stop because I think I'm sort of out of time. The second part of our strategy is, as I said earlier, this idea that we want to create an entrepreneurial mindset campus. Okay. And again, my thinking is organized into inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Again, as part of our inputs, we got our living lenses, as I said earlier. We got our multi-sectoral and disciplinary and agile know-how that we can mobilize around the place. We got our buildings, great building where we create these collision spaces where people come together and develop these new ideas. And I want to create also new HR figures within the university, for example, to tackle the problem I mentioned earlier of the changing mentality that we need within the university and the local ecosystem. We are now going to appoint somebody that's going to be the head of entrepreneurial mindset. So basically the mission of this person is going to be to change the mentality. We want people to become more entrepreneurial. Okay. So we want them to organize activities, maybe research programs, maybe teaching programs, maybe discussions, whatever is necessary to change the mentality, we are going to do. And this person is going to be in charge of that. Of course, it's a very complex environment to navigate. So, and to fully exploit. So we're going to signposting people or where to go and what to do, depending on their interest and what they want to do. We're going to make our infrastructure available. We're going to make available financial resources. And if we don't have the financial resources, we're going to connect you with the people that have got the financial resources. We're going to connect you with the different businesses of different type and size. Some of them are going to take place within the building. Some of them will be outside the building. Then there is the non-EFI environment that is kind of around us, part of our ecosystem. Like, for example, I want to involve Julia becoming an associate of our center because I think she's got important know-how on what's going on here, guys, to help us, some of our entrepreneurs, if, for example, they want to go global. They need maybe network here. They need to understand what markets are doing here, what financial support maybe is available here if they come here, what kind of regulation is in place in the sector where they want to operate. Maybe they want to expand their own network, whatever. Maybe Julia will be able to help them. So we are developing a team of associates that will do that. Okay. And we're also organizing things like startup workshops and stuff like that with organizations like Codebase that I said that earlier on is this national incubator program that we have in Scotland. This is going to lead, hopefully, to outputs and activities. We already have a very well-structured process and structure in Edinburgh in support of students and colleagues that want to start companies. It's managed by a spin-out of the Edinburgh University. It's called Edinburgh Innovation. Basically, is our tech, our TTO, and at the moment, Edinburgh spins out more than 100 companies, startups, and spin-outs a year. Okay, so we are second best in the UK, I think, after Oxford, I think. But we want to put momentum behind those activities in the areas that we are interested in, the 4 sectors I told you about. And we want to see progress in areas like prototyping, our students and colleagues winning things like hackathons that we are going to partly organize. We want to see them learning, involved in this process. If they're not, they're not familiar with subjects in business and stuff like that, we want them to learn what they need to learn. We want also peer learning to take place. Some of the kind of learning you need to start new businesses, you don't learn at school, you learn it on the field. So we want to create a space where that can actually happen, with mentors as well, experienced people in the space, and also companies that will be there to help you with that. There is going to be physical support as well. The base center, which is the AI and IT center I said earlier, they already have an accelerator and incubator. We want to have one as well. And the tech scaler is going to be in our building as well. We're going to give them 50 seats. So it's going to be a very kind of multidimensional and very exciting environment with a bunch of different activities taking place. Eventually, we hope this is going to lead to outcomes in terms of new startup teams, new proof of concepts, new IP being created, rental income for us as well, new communities of practice being developed and being resilient and developing throughout time. And we hope that in the end, this is going to make a difference for the local ecosystem and the local economy. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here. I probably talked too much, didn't I?
Excellent, because Amelia was just reminding us that we were running heavily out of time.
Okay.
And yes, it's really, anyway, thanks a lot. It was very interesting to have a better understanding of what's your plan and what you're already doing. For a number of reasons, again, I mean, there are a number of actions that we could get inspired from. And more in general, because I've been involved personally in this issue of entrepreneurship ecosystem and universities for a number of years now. And what you are just saying resonates very well what we were doing in the US just last week. So that there are also possible other connections to be developed. But now let's go straight into the panel discussion. And afterwards, I see that the room is getting fuller and fuller. So feel free to ask us questions in case you want to intervene. But maybe we should start now with our colleagues based in Helsinki that have been very patient online, listening to what Alessandro had to tell. So we have Patricia online, and perhaps, I mean, I would like to ask you to, anyway, react to the presentation just given by Alessandro in any way you want, and also perhaps give us a little bit of introduction to what you are doing at UN Global Pulse in Finland and also over here. Over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for the invitation and the honor to sit on the same panel with Professor Rosiello and also Sri Ganesh, who I know from when he was with Pulse Lab Jakarta. So my name is Patricia Lowe, and I'm the Senior Analyst in the Innovation Scaling team at UN Global Pulse. And like Julia said, I'm dialing in today from Helsinki, where I'm usually based. So again, Professor Rosiello, thank you so much for the very extensive presentation. It sounds really interesting, and like it's such a busy space for innovation in Scotland as well. And I think I took some notes down with a lot of things that resonated, especially on one slide where you kind of put the words innovation creates value for society and solve the world's biggest challenges. And I think also in the work that you presented, I see a lot of common themes that we're trying to also do in as UN Global Pulse, and as my team specifically, is to create the space to allow people to innovate, and then also provide the supports to them to take that innovation to something a lot more. So thank you for that. And I think I also quite appreciated the ecosystem of wicked problems. And I think you might already know this about the messy middle. When you take innovation in the early stages to scale, you've got all that messy middle. And I'm just thinking, if we throw that messy middle into something that's trying to, fix the ecosystem of wicked problems, it's a lot of work that we all need to chip in and partner on and collaborate and work together for. So those are my reflections on your presentation, Professor. Maybe just to illustrate a little bit about what UN Global Pulse does, and I can speak mostly for the team that I'm working with as well. I've got a few slides. If I can just share my screen, would that be all right? I can't hear anyone, so I'm not sure if it's a thumbs up. Thumbs up? Great, thank you. How does that look for everyone? I hope you can see.
Perfect. Yeah,
that.
we can see it, the presentation.
Great, thank you. So the UN Global Pulse is the UN Secretary General's innovation lab, and we work to advance the SG's priorities. And UN Global Pulse has presence in 4 locations, all of which has different disciplines. And we have presence in New York, Helsinki, Uganda, and Jakarta. And I believe Professor Rosiello has also visited the Jakarta office yesterday, I think. And but one thing to note as well is that so Helsinki's office has innovation scaling, and also we have a foresight team, and also that's where operations operate from as well. And we've also got M&E, partnerships, and knowledge management specialties sitting here. And Jakarta, I think a lot of you already know very well. It was previously known as Pulse Lab Jakarta, but also recently transitioned to become the UN Global Pulse Asia Pacific Hub. And the official launch in June, just I think a month ago or less, celebrated its decade-long achievements in Indonesia, and marks the scaling up of innovation and sustainable development efforts to a much broader region, so Asia Pacific region. And now we welcome opportunities to collaborate, learn, and grow together as well. So at the moment, so that's our presence. At the moment, our focus is to support the UN 2.0 transformation agenda, and in helping to advance the Secretary General's vision for a UN that is well equipped and prepared to respond to humanitarian and development challenges. We support these areas that we call the quintet of change. And as you can see here, these 5 areas have been identified as key capabilities that can be strengthened and that can move the UN to become stronger, more diverse, and more agile, to bring us back on track towards achieving the SDGs. One capability here that you can see, which I will be speaking more to because it's the area that I work in specifically, is innovation, and innovation scaling in particular. Innovation will be crucial because to make progress in a fast-changing world, in a world with wicked problems, we must evolve how we do things. But to be able to do that, we must also understand innovation, manage innovation, and most importantly, scale it, because we will only have limited impact unless we scale innovations and make sure that it achieves what it has set out to achieve. So in 2021, the team looked at innovations focused on maternal, newborn, and child health as a start, to try and identify the type of support they needed to take their work from pilot to scale, and ultimately become digital public goods to serve communities better. The key takeaways from that was that the work should be needs-driven. I think that was a major theme that came out from a lot that we looked at. And even today, like, we kind of go with the mantra of like, it needs to be needs-driven. It highlighted also the importance of co-designing and co-creating, and including the end user at the center of the solution development. And again, this ties back to it being needs-driven. And then clear ownership of the digital solution was also identified as an important key to scaling success. But in all of this, it was also identified that the journey from pilot to scale is a long one, and like I mentioned before, has a very messy middle that needed a lot of structured support. So based on this and keeping in our sight the focus of UN Global Pulse in supporting the UN system and the SG's priorities, the team then conducted a bigger research exercise to look broadly across the UN system and its peripheries with similar intent to see what type of support was needed to take innovations, what can we do to support the UN system to take them from pilot to scale. And we definitely saw like the innovation scene is very lively within the UN itself. But what was also interesting was that the opportunities and challenges that we identified earlier, we found it here as well. And they were very similar. And but obviously, because we had a broader scope, we also realized that people needed flexible funding. They needed extensive mentoring over time with structured support in areas such as partnerships, monitoring and evaluation as well. And like I pointed out earlier, sometimes a basic thing as needing permission or time to do innovation was a key factor. And then finally, also an emerging theme from the research was that even getting access to colleagues, to stakeholders, or knowledge and sharing resources to collaborate would be very, very helpful too. And that came in, so that and the recommendations that came with it are now published. And you can see this picture here. That's the front page of our report that was launched just 2 months ago as well. So the way the UN works to fulfill its mandate of safe, ethical, reliable delivery is quite different from the framework in which, as I'm sure a lot of you know, innovation needs and scaling in particular needs. So what we've also learned is that innovation needs a very flexible, fast-moving operational method, whereas the UN, we need to make sure that we're reliable. So we've made 3 recommendations that the UN system can take on to reconcile these 2 different ways of operating to become what we are trying to say ambidextrous. So on one hand, you're fulfilling its mandate, and then on the other hand, also being able to make space for innovation and scaling it. So these 3 recommendations here are deepen good practices and knowledge, broaden support across the system for innovation scaling, and to expand the horizons of the UN and its innovation capabilities. And so my team is now focusing on bringing these recommendations into practical terms. And under deepening good practices, a subgroup on innovation scaling as a community of practice was launched with the UN Innovation Network as a space for UN colleagues to come together, share learnings, and accelerate and diffuse good practices. But now a big bulk of our work is under broadening support for the system. And we have a service offer called the Scale Catalyst that you can see on the screen. It has 3 interconnecting roles for the UN system. So as a scale accelerator, an innovation capability building service, and a cross-system advocate for innovation scaling. And under the Scale Accelerator work especially, we have run scale readiness baselining workshops, which take innovations through a structured process where they self-assess what their scale vision is. So looking 10+ years ahead, seeing what they want to ultimately achieve, and then coming back to assessing where they are now, and then finally seeing what their route towards that vision needs. And our goal now is to help identify any gaps in taking that innovation, whether it's a product, a service, or a process, from perpetual pilot and moving it into scale, and then providing them with technical support to reach the scale vision, all in support of achieving an inclusive and sustainable future. Thank you. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Patricia. I think we will all have a look at this report. It sounds very interesting. And anyway, I mean, what I find very interesting is that it's very clear that, you know, from a very much R&D or even patent-related innovation definitions, now, I mean, in very different regions of the world, at the UN, at the University of Edinburgh, even here in Indonesia, at the area, we are moving towards a definition of innovation that is much more broad. I mean, that is much more inclusive. And again, I mean, is looking at, of course, commercial impact, because at the end, we want companies to be successful, but also very much and importantly, it's societal impact. I think the SDG agendas the SDGs that were created by UNDP, by the way, has provided a very, very useful framework also to define innovation and the road forward. And I can definitely tell you that when I moved to Indonesia and I started to research Southeast Asia, I was really impressed by this, especially very young and dynamic generation of entrepreneurs that were really they are really putting SDGs at the center of their business solutions. So once again, I mean, trying to combine a commercial impact with something that goes beyond, the narrow definition of innovation as something that is just to make money. And again, I mean, I think it's very interesting to see that depending on where we are located globally, there's definitely a movement that is going into this direction. And what Alessandro was talking about before, co-creation, the foresight, co-collision spaces is also something that I think resonates very much with these ideas. But I think we are tremendously out of time. So let me now move to try to get the point of view of Ganesh, who's someone else that has a very, very great experience on innovation, data-driven innovation, the digital economy. And then perhaps we will try to open up the floor, because many of you are still in the room, and we would like to hear from you in case you have questions for Alessandro or for the other panelists. But over to Ganesh now.
So just some thoughts, right? And I suppose I'm sitting between two Italians, and then I feel like the words of the late Marxist philosopher Antonio Gramsci comes to mind. He said, I think while he was in prison, in his prison notebooks, as they got to know, this was in the 1930s, 1920s, 1930s. He said, the crisis, let me paraphrase, the crisis currently is that the old is dying and the new is not yet born. And in this interregnum, Myrad, I think he said something like Myrad, imaginations, not imaginations, I forget the word that he used, will manifest, right? I think it is appropriate in this current context too, as we think about digital is the old ways of working, and now you have digital innovation happening, AI, big data. Now to that mix, we've added words like behavioral science, futures, etc. And we don't know quite yet where all of this is going, and we are starting to imagine what the harms and what the benefits could be. But when we take it back to the people that we want to help create new inventions that will take advantage of this thrust, right? We can start to think about what are the difficulties that they face. And one is sort of predictability, right? Predictability of regulation, for example, right? And I think, that's something where we have a lot more to do in this region too, especially in the digital tech environment in particular. But just to sort of link that back to, where, today's talk around, what the professor sort of was so kind to spend his time to talk us through all the different avenues through which the futurism agenda is being that you all are trying to achieve. I think that goes back to reinforce the need for catalysts in our region as well, right? The ones who can bring these different specialities, stakeholders together in one room to both catalyze technology in this region, as well as to percolate the ideas that may be needed. There's a whole lot that I could, I suppose, speak around, the sort of regulation and policy deficit that exists in the region, but in interest of time, I'll sort of stop there for the moment if there are any specific questions. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the very synthetic but extremely relevant intervention. And I feel ashamed. I feel that the writing of Antonio Gramsci much better than I do. So I need to go back and do some studying. Yeah, but I totally agree. And let me just add that because you're talking about foresights and the fast changing regulation. Also, you know, the current geopolitical landscape is changing very fast, and it is something that at the end, I mean, even people that want to start a business or technologists, they need to consider when deciding, you know, in which way to go. So this is another area where perhaps, you know, interdisciplinary expertise is very much needed. You have to have political analysts together with technologists, ethicists, or economists to try to figure out possible scenarios for the future. But anyway, now it's your time. So please, I'm sure that perhaps some of you would like to ask questions either to Alessandro or to Patricia or Ganesh. Anyone who would like to raise any question or remarks or comment? Excellent. I'm not sure. Do we have a mic? Yes, great.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentations and the panel responses just now. I have a question. I feel like the examples that Alessandro and Patricia mentioned are very, how do you call it? It's reliant on a physical location where you can meet someone, where you can meet a technology provider or a health provider, someone with the resources, where you need to meet them at a specific location or at a specific time and place. And that's certainly good. But what if you are in a situation where, geographically speaking, you can't access these people? You're a bit far from the urban locations, or where this center or UN agency is set up. But you need to meet these people, to gather the resources, to gather the people, to gather the expertise needed to develop an innovation and scale it up and then disseminate it. I believe Alessandro briefly mentioned something about an alternative to physically meeting people, although eventually the examples were much more focused on physically meeting people. Are there perhaps examples of how you're able to maybe collaborate, maybe digitally via digital hubs rather than physical hubs, or other non-spatial meetups? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. In reality, I think it's quite important to point out that what we are trying to build is a physical as well as a virtual environment. In my personal opinion, physical meetups are really important. There is an element of knowledge transfer that is quite simply, if not impossible, very difficult to achieve physical distance. Nevertheless, some of the programs we are building are going to be virtual, or at least partly virtual. I mentioned our teaching that is based on this principle of fusion learning. Also, I mentioned, for example, the Tech Scaler, which is this program that is being supported by the Scottish government, and incubation program supported by the Scottish government, and enacted by these incubators called Codebase. And what they do there, they take you through all the different stages of new venture creation. And some of them are all of it is virtual, actually. But it's quite interesting because some of it is virtual on a global scale. Like the final part of the program, actually, you are taught by as part of the Reforge program that takes place in Stanford, California, and they introduce you to the network they have over there, including the investors. So you get introduced to a network that is basically based on the west coast of the US, and you're based in Scotland. But so far, our center, like the building I showed you before, doesn't exist. And we have been in existence for 2 years now. So everything we have been doing is virtual, actually. So far, we have been like 100% virtual. I think, however, that when the building will be available, we will power up our activities big time, because I think virtual is possible, but physical is better. That's my personal opinion. For certain things, not everything. But for certain things, I think physical contact, in person, it's important.
Thank you, and I guess this is why you're here. But let's hear maybe from Patricia.
Hi, and thank you for the question. I'm going to support everything that Professor Rosiello said, and also just to clarify, especially when we speak of space, it's not just physical. Obviously, if you can meet in person, that's always the better option, and especially if you're trying to kind of pin down very, very busy people, bringing them in a physical space at a set time is definitely much more useful. But space is also, we say in terms of a concept of space, like a virtual space or a gathering where people can go to or come together. So like the professor said, virtual is definitely an option. For example, the scale workshops that we have run so far, especially the recent ones, it was for 13 country teams. I think they range from Latin America, I think North America, there was Central Asia, Africa. So we ran them virtually and it was possible. It was just identified that obviously being in one space at the same time together would be useful, but not the only option. Thank you.
I agree. I mean, it's true that for some type of interactions, being in the same space is so important. But at the same time, this kind of hybrid mode perhaps is the way to go. We learned a lot how to work differently throughout the pandemic, and that is opening up really a new world of possibilities that I think we were not even considering or imagining before. So I think there's still a lot to be discovered and understood, even in terms of the power of digital for scaling up or fostering networks. But before, again, there's another question. Ganesh, anything you want to add regarding to this point?
No, I think, if we talk about innovation, I think we need to also the importance of serendipity, right? And serendipitous meeting up, right? And that's very hard to accomplish on online networks. That is hard. So we'll just, yeah.
I think we have another question, right? So please.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, my name is Oki, and I lead on foreign government in Indonesia tech hub here in Indonesia in terms of social development programs. Thank you, Patricia, Professor as well, for sharing that. I think it was very fascinating in terms of the theory of change you presented. I have a few questions. Feel free to answer whichever is relevant. So really interested to know whether you have taken similar models under EFI and have collaborated globally with other higher education institutions or other governments across the world, and whether you have tried to discuss and replicating this particular model, and how are you going about that? Obviously, it looks like a very complex structure, complex web of multi-stakeholders that you're involving. Really curious to know whether a lot of the efforts and the programs that you are delivering through EFI Institute is majority fully driven under the DDI program, or is it also kind of half private? And that, how is that division made, and kind of how do you decide that as an institution, because you are involving kind of this the tech sector that is fully private, entrepreneurial, academia plus the government? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. All of them are extremely relevant. So in terms of what we've been trying to do so far, so I've been appointed just over a year ago. The center is really quite new. And at the moment, our focus has been kind of more local than anything else. We're trying to develop the local infrastructure, but there are some role models that we have been inspired by. And what we are trying to do at the moment is to build international alliances. And the first one we are working on, I think we are at a stage where we have an MOU. It's actually with the place where Patricia is based at the moment, Helsinki. A delegation from Helsinki came to Edinburgh, and then we went there in correspondence with this event they have every year there. It's the biggest startup conference in the world. It's called Slash. So we went over there, and I have to tell you that I was astonished by the turnaround that they managed to achieve in Finland. I was in Finland 15 years ago. It's a completely different place today. And this idea of entrepreneurial mindset came to me actually when I was there. They have something similar. And what they have achieved there is a complete change in their mindset. Actually, I really like also the fact that they have 7 academic institutions all working together as part of a kind of integrated ecosystem in Helsinki. The city is more or less the same size as Edinburgh, but there is a lot more going on in terms of the kind of activities and structures that we are trying to build. So we are trying to go, we're trying to develop the local, but we're also considering other examples. In terms of replicating what we are doing, it's far too early even to say whether we are successful or not. So whether it's worth replicating it or not, we are not there at that stage, I would say. Forgot the last question you asked. Which one? Yeah. So the majority of so talking about teaching, like 98% is institutionally driven. We allowed Codebase to do a couple of courses just because we sort of didn't have the capability to do that, but that's also quite interesting because we do have the capability of doing that. It's just that interestingly, the school where I work, the business school, has not taken a very active role in terms of the overall DDI initiative until the FI has been set up. Now the business school is the biggest contributor in terms of hours per academic to the FI. So we're taking up a big role. But not just in Edinburgh, but I would say even in some of the literature on ecosystems, entrepreneurial ecosystems, it has been frequently suggested that you want to keep business schools as far away as possible from this kind of experiments. And the reason why this is the case, it's because A, you don't want an inward kind of mentality, and B, the kind of knowledge, expertise, and know-how you need is more kind of gained on the ground rather than, so you want to have many more practitioners and that kind of experience. But what I also observe in relation to that is that the business schools are changing and universities are changing. I don't know here, but in the UK, this is happening. And now we are moving away from this model where you need to be a good researcher, a good teacher. In the UK, we got this new thing that's called impact. So you know that I don't know here, but in the UK, every 5 to 7 years, there is a review where faculties are judged on the basis of what they have accomplished. And their budget for the next 5 or 7 years depends on that. So they have added this new dimension that is called impact. And basically impact means what has been your impact on society, the economy within which you operate. So about 25% of, and to grow, of the financial resources are now allocated on the basis of that. So university, that's a very strong institutional incentive to change. We don't just write papers anymore. We need to have an impact. And our teaching needs to change because students, they don't want to learn a discipline anymore. They want to become good at something that is relevant. And that's what we're trying to do at EFI. And we are a test bed for that for our university. So if successful, the model to complete the answer is that will be replicated at the beginning internally, but we hope externally as well moving forward.
Thank you for the presentations. My name is Luri Sofian. I'm from Ministry of Finance. So So you mentioned a lot about entrepreneurship and innovations, and I think we all agree those two words are important for private institutions. But the last word, entrepreneurship, is not really common in government. Like yesterday, I just read an article about governpreneurship. I think that's a new term for, installing entrepreneurship in a government agency. And just wondering, what do you think about this? Because in one of your focus area is also about public services. Probably this is something that you want to touch on, and you can elaborate. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Honestly, great question. I think there are 3 dimensions to it. The first dimension is the dimension of the mindset. So individual people within government, how entrepreneurial they are. Okay, I would say by and large. So what I always tell my students when I teach my class at the university on new venture creation is that people are not normally entrepreneurial. Psychologically speaking, most people are not entrepreneurial. What I mean by entrepreneurship is not just taking risks, but being able to live with very uncertain conditions, day in and day out. Okay, so most people are. It's really probably not part of the human nature. So people who do that are kind of outliers. And I would say people who work in government, but even academics, are probably the last people that you would say they would be entrepreneurial. So that's why that change in mindset is so important if you want to achieve what we are set out to achieve, which is making the local university being an engine of the local economy. Okay, so that's the first thing that it's very important. And that's why I was so amazed about what happened in Finland, because when I went there, you had very young people doing some unbelievable things. Like this Lush thing it's actually a business, turns around several millions a year euros. The CEO was a woman she was 21 years old. Okay, and at that event, she interviewed the Prime Minister of Finland, who was also a woman and also very young. Okay, so that's the first. That you need a change in mentality, not just to become more entrepreneurial, but also to involve groups in society that have not been involved as leaders, let's say. The second bit is the role of government in entrepreneurship, on making the economy more entrepreneurial. So when I started my career, I was working in the same research center with a woman called Mariana Mazzucato. Probably you know her. She has become an international star. A book called Entrepreneurial State, where she basically takes up ideas from the same stream of thinking that we both belong to, which is Schumpeterian economics, and basically argues that really the real engine of structural change in an economy is the government. For many years, international monetary funds and our organization, they went around the world telling people, telling government, abstain from intervening in the economy, abstain from, let the market fix it. And then you see that actually the countries, especially in Asia, that actually managed to catch up with the West have very interventionist governments. And what kind of intervention? Very kind of innovative and entrepreneurial kind of intervention. So the US government spends historically spent billions of dollars supporting sectors that then became the key drivers of economic growth in the US. Only now in Europe, we are beginning to do these kind of things like the green transition, okay? So I think governments as a whole need to become also more entrepreneurial. The final aspect is that experiments like the one we are trying to develop are also very important, because not only government needs to become more entrepreneurial, both in terms of the mentality and what they do, but also they need to understand that they are part of a complex ecosystem, okay? Where there are different players, and they need to be able to work and collaborate in partnerships with these players. I had a very interesting discussion yesterday with an organization also based here in Jakarta called Prospera, where, you know, what they're trying to do, they're trying to develop knowledge base and databases that help government make informed decisions. And that's very important. You know, we've been trying in Europe. I mean, Julia was mentioning earlier on, we met a few years ago in a project set up by the OECD and the EU to enact a strategy that is called the smart specialization in Europe. Basically, it says, if you want to intervene in governments, you need to do it in areas where you got some potential. But you need to do it in a smart way. I mean, we can talk about what smart is. Sorry, I've just taken a lot of time. I can't open that parenthesis now. But to do that, you need intelligence. And to be intelligent, you need to be smart, you need to be entrepreneurial. The project that Julia and I did together for ERIA was sort of that, because what ERIA wanted to know is, where are the most interesting entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem emerging in Asia? This is a critical input for us to inform our strategy. If you don't have that kind of knowledge, it's very difficult for you to intervene. You know, economists in a lab or in an office, yes, they can work on data, they can you know, analyze trade and things like that, or what sectors are doing, but without that very ingrained and micro knowledge about what's going on at the local level or in departments, what kind of changes needed, for example, in terms of governance or mentality, it's very difficult. Just give you the very last example, if I can. I'm going to share you my personal experience, very recent personal experience. I'm an entrepreneur as well as an academic. And because of Brexit, we decided to move one of my businesses to Italy, which is my own country. And Italy now has got like about 200 billion euros to invest as part of the plan for resilience and recovery from the European Union. This is money that's been just given as a grant to Italy by the European Union to restart the economy. They are having major problems spending that, major problems. Of the first tranche of money given in 2022, 33 billion euros, they spent 1. And now, having experienced the level of bureaucracy that you have to go through to be able to get that money with my company, I realized why that is happening. It's just the bureaucracy over there. It's creating problems that don't need to be. So you can have the best plans for the government and the best intelligence, the smartest strategies, but if the elements on the ground that you need to implement and deliver are not there, and the people are not entrepreneurial enough to be able to do that, then you're not going to go anywhere. So I hope that answers your question.
We still have one more questions from the gentleman. Please also introduce yourself and institution. And I think we can also, maybe if you have more questions, we can also pull up and then answer it to the for the panelists. So after the gentleman, please, if anyone wants to entertain one last questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to ask you something here. As you know that innovation is equal invention plus commercial level. And then under innovation chain, development pace, maybe under triple X or pentax, how to engage this? What is the criteria? Did you make some analysis before and from the downstream in order to see it's not just only invention, but the commercial level is high to support the economic development? Yeah, please, maybe. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I mean, strategy is geared towards so the government is investing, all this money because they want to change the local economy. And the key principle is that to do that, we have to expand the funnel, as I said earlier, and make the local ecosystem, innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem, bigger, sounder, and more resilient. So this is the key principles. We are actors. We are a key actor as part of that strategy. And we are going to work with whoever it's necessary to make that happen. So I didn't have a lot of time, actually. I used more time than I should have, but I was going to make some examples on how this translates into practice. So yesterday, for example, as I said, I went to see the guys from the Global Pulse, and they do these deep dive ideas. And for them, it's about doing research that can have an impact on society or the organizations they work with. We do the same thing, but we do it for innovation. Okay, so these living lenses I was talking about is people who come to us like Aberdeen with a problem. Why is that our funds that have an ESG tag performing better? We give you the solution, and then you go out and implement that solution to make more money, essentially, in that case, okay? So that's just a very practical example on how we can mobilize our expertise and capabilities to help a local organization do better economically. Then you got the other side of the coin, which is entrepreneurship. So as I said earlier, so Edinburgh is doing very well in terms of starting up new businesses out of the university, about 100 every year. The IT ecosystem in terms of the commercial one, it's a fairly recent thing in Edinburgh, okay? When I went to Edinburgh a few years ago, we were spinning out the university something like between 10 and 15 companies a year. Now we are more between like 60 or 70, and that has created an ecosystem around the university. Now there are hundreds of companies employing something just below 100,000 people in Scotland. Scotland is very small. I mean, how many people live in Jakarta? Like 30 million? Scotland is like 5 million. Okay, so 100,000 people working in a newly created sector is very important in terms of restructuring the economy. We want to expand that. We want to make that much bigger. That's why we need to incubate and organize a much better process for them to be mentored, to be supported financially, to develop better business models, to go global if necessary. As I said in the answer before, if they need to go Stanford, they go Stanford. If the market is Asia, surely you guys are going to help us, and our companies are going to come over here. So basically, it's what we can do for them to support them throughout the different steps of the way, starting from education and skills, eventually with finding financiers or helping them enter new markets.
This is the big problem right now to convince our joint cooperation under climate change issue. What is your experience under this? You have that?
Sorry, I didn't.
Under climate change issue.
For the climate change issue, okay. So climate change obviously is not part of our remit in terms of the areas where, but it's a key priority, strategic priority. Everything that we need to do need to be environmentally sustainable. Okay. And the university obviously has got great capabilities in terms of that. We've got some very good programs within the university. Some of our departments are working on very advanced projects. There are a number of initiatives that are taking place in terms of technological development. Scotland, for example, is a place that has been traditionally very strong on tidal technologies, for example. So the university has just set up a big technology center to develop technologies for tidal waves, so generate energy out of tidal waves. My own business, the one I mentioned before, works on the wind. We developed a new type of wind blade. So that in terms of technological development. Then there is the other side of the coin. It's again a change in mindset in terms of any kind of innovation we are developing needs to comply with environmental standards, and that's very important to us. Okay. Also, in terms of the change in mentality of our students and our staff and everybody, everything we do, we ingrain that kind of change in mindset. So you need to operate on many different levels. But the incentive now from the government and international organizations to comply with environmental standards is very strong, and we are very much engaged on the change in mentality, but also in the development of new tech that will make a difference. I'm just reading the newspaper this morning that a Scottish person, very wealthy person in Scotland, has just developed technology for airplanes that will be powered by hydrogen. And he will get to the market 18 months before Airbus. We have small jets, but that is a major achievement as well, And again, it's all part of the ecosystem within which we operate. And there is a lot of serendipity, as said earlier on. You never know what's going to happen and where this is going to happen. But we are trying to create the preconditions for new ideas that make a difference to be developed first and then exploited, both commercially, but not necessarily commercially.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, developing a well-functioning ecosystem is a way to de-risk innovation, if you want. I think we are running out of time, so unless there are more questions, perhaps I would like to give a final word to Patricia and Ganesh, in case you want to just share your final comments before you conclude. Maybe over to Patricia now. Wait, this is the very final questions, because I think then we need to close, but let me just withdraw what I said. So final question, and then we want to hear also from Patricia and Ganesh before closing.
So thank you for the opportunity. I'm an intern currently at the Ministry of Defense. And so my question is that I have seen the things that you share here is about economic integration and development in ASEAN. And Mr. Alessandro has mentioned about bureaucracy and the government, and that it is making it more complicated and hard to, for example, to integration of the economic and development in the regions, especially if we see in Indonesia, we have a lot of complicated bureaucracy, as I have experienced myself. What do you think is the best way to tackle the issue of complicated bureaucracy that is currently making this economic integration very hard to do? Because the way I see it, unless we have an answer to this problem of unnecessarily complicated bureaucracy, we cannot conduct integration of economy in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia, in East Asia, because one of the things that are currently holding it is, for example, in Indonesia, to have a cooperation, you need to pass it even to the people's representative, and there's a lot of unnecessarily complicated long list of bureaucracy that you need to do these kind of economic integration. So I want an opinion from Mr. Alessandro maybe on how to tackle this issue of bureaucracy that is currently threatening the economic integration and development in the region of ASEAN and East Asia. Thank you.
I don't claim I'm an expert in this area, but I'll give you a couple of ideas. The first one is what I've just answered earlier on, is the change in mentality. If you can change the mentality of the university, hopefully you can also change mentality in government. Okay, and for people to, like in the case I made earlier, like a step change in the way, for example, certain funds have been allocated, more, making people more risk-taking, faster in making decisions, also more knowledgeable about certain things would make a huge difference. I can't talk about the Asian environment, but talking about the environment, I know. The other aspect of it is that one of the 4 areas where we need to make a difference, as I said earlier on, is GovTech, governmental technology. So technology for government can help a lot. So we are working, as I said earlier, with the health care system, and also with the prison system in Scotland to make them more efficient and reduce somehow bureaucratic burden and increase the efficiency of the organizations. Finding solutions. I saw yesterday the UN Global Pulse was also involved in trying to find solutions of this kind. So data, AI, and the technology we have available these days, I think can go a long way of it all depends on whether or not there is a political will to actually do that. Because if you want to use technology in government, it probably means that some people will have to be replaced, and that's not, politically speaking, very popular. So, or they will have to change routines and way of working. And I would say probably in places like government in certain countries, People have been slightly reluctant to do that. That's my own experience. So I say it's very challenging, but there is potential.
I just want to add to that a little bit, and just using some examples from the past, right? And this is past from, when I used to be part of Global Pulse as well as before. There have been many instances where, you can say that, in our developing countries, which is sort of where I mostly work in, right? Often the government will try and bring in a special purpose vehicle when they want to sort of do something very innovative, right? Some new entity created, right? With funding for 5 years or 10 years, etc. Different incentives for the hiring, right? Different incentives in terms of pay, etc. Right? But after 5-6 years, it sort of says it goes back into government. But that is where the civil service gets you. Because all this while, they're looking very enviously at these people who get paid differently, even though their structures are very different in how, what are the incentives. And at that point, you get squeezed. And then what does this, the longevity of this, that. So that's a frequent problem that I see in developing countries. The second point I want to add is, much as, sort of Alessandro says about, the mindset, etc., right? And very important. You do have a lot of people, and I found that out both here in Indonesia as well as, elsewhere. You have a lot of well-meaning individuals in governments who want to do good, who have the entrepreneurial mindset, and who are looking for the structural support to help them do that, right? And they're often the people who know how to navigate the politics of the bureaucracy, right? So I think, that there is a place for that. But if you want to have lasting change, you need to change the civil service code in who is hired, what are the incentive structures, because all of that is actually, what you call, in the computer science, it's a waterfall model. Someone above tells you what to do, and you're supposed to do it. And you keep pushing down. And by the time you get to implementation, it's very far from what may have been the intent of the person that was doing it. So you need to be able to change that. And that's not a problem just here. When I sort of used to give talks at the Joint Research Council at the European Commission, they would ask me, how do you sort of achieve this particular problem as well? So I'll just stop there.
Thank you very much. Patricia.
Hi, so sorry, I don't want to disrupt, but I really have to run to my next call. So I will take my leave now, and thank you again, everyone. I'll leave you to continue with your discussions.
Thank you very much for joining us, Patricia from Helsinki.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Well, I think Patricia needs to leave, and many of you probably also need to leave, so it's time to close. We had a very, very rich discussion, and we are almost 20 minutes late. But the fact that this discussion was so rich is making me think that perhaps, this should just be the beginning. We should organize many more of these events where we talk about entrepreneurship and innovation, what's happening in other regions around the world, why it's relevant for ASEAN, what is happening in ASEAN, and why what's happening in ASEAN is relevant for many other locations. We talked a lot about the Nordic countries because Alessandro mentioned Helsinki, and I think those of us who have worked on innovation and entrepreneurship in Europe, we know that the Nordic countries always come up at some point because they are leaders globally when it comes to innovation, including innovation in the public sector. But more in general, I think that there are lots of trends that are very, very interesting for outside the world happening over here. Ganesh talked about how technology could be used in government and in public institutions, and I think we already saw many interesting examples throughout the pandemic when basically certain services could not be delivered the way they used to be, and therefore countries and governments, including over here in Indonesia, relied heavily on partnership with the private sector or digital tech to basically speed up things that were becoming extremely urgent. But that's perhaps for our next conversation. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you, Ganesh. And thank you, of course, to Silka for being with us until the very end, and Amelia, without who would have been